So let's open up Biden's quad chart. And I know there are a lot of people out there feeling that Biden is not the real Biden. I have no way of confirming whether this is true or not, whether the current Biden is not the real Biden or if it's the real Biden who's had a facelift and a lot of filler. What I do know and feel is that his chart seems to be on the mark in terms of what we've been charting from a Uranian perspective, from using the dial, and how his natal chart shows, and just, what's going on now, the immense fraud, the deception, the fake facade, with his progressed sun, Neptune Kronos, on his progressed meridian, with transiting Neptune opposing his natal meridian, which tells us more about the deception, the instability, and the confusion he seems to be dealing with. So we'll continue to read his chart as if he is Biden with a facelift, Botox, and filler. And everyone can take an athletic stance around his chart if you wish. So over the next few months, there are two things I want to point out. First, yes, he's been having that transiting Neptune opposing his meridian, and we see all of the enigmatic and mysterious circumstances surrounding him. One could say he's channeling the dark, but we can also see the weakened state, the vulnerability and the uncertainty, the facade, opposing Neptune dissolving his foundations. And perhaps there is a lot of denial on his part. As I've told you before, this is not a transit, the Neptune opposing the meridian, for expansion in the world, but recession from it, a stripping away of those attachments. So you've got that going on. But a very, very important structure which comes into view in his progress chart, affecting both his sun and his meridian points. So let's simplify this visual by putting up his progress chart. And you can see you've got this Admetos Vulcanus Uranus structure that is on his sun and Kronos, which hits the latter half of March through April. And also, if we move his pointer on his meridian from now through the end of May, which gets us to those eclipses in May and June that are so poignant on his chart. Now, this structure, Admetos Vulcanus Uranus, with the Sun Kronos and the meridian, can be telling us about that he's encountering obstruction, disruptions or upsets relating to power, a decrease in power, or a lot of political opposition, which I believe we see, especially with that Kronos there, which is an exact square right now through May, which can be blocks to state power, and it can mean it's sudden or the beginning of suppression. It could also be telling us that he's digging his heels in and he's not going to let the tyranny fly. I think that with all of that Neptune there, he's not seeing this realistically at all. And he's putting up a fight, a lot of perseverance with this configuration. He's not letting go so easily, but that's not going to fly. Remember that transiting Neptune opposing his meridian is disengaging his entire being here. It has a dissolving effect at the foundation. So when you combine the hard combination of the Uranus, Vulcanus, Hades, and the dissolving Neptune, things can get really messy. You might see a lot more mistakes and blunders. But it's his June 10th solar eclipse, and we'll put that chart up. And you can see here the alignment. The alignments are incredible. It's exactly on his natal meridian, his soul, only a few seconds away, and the eclipse is squaring that meridian, which would be a more challenging aspect for his career, where either personal or public situations can prevent advancement. And it's also conjuncting his directed Aries axis, which is the world axis, which is him out in the public world. So we're all seeing this. As well as precisely on the progressed Aries, meridian Aries midpoint structure, which is again telling us about his relationship to the world. Now remember, with that June 10th eclipse that we've already reviewed, and it's this outside ring here, that the planetary pictures of deep changes in structure, changes in hive thinking, changes in government authority is particularly relevant here because it is so exact. So you can see these change structures, the Saturn-Pluto midpoint, the Uranus-Pluto midpoint, exactly on this axis. Biden's highly sensitive personal points and flanked by the Chronos on the side, which has to do with government, authority, and things high up. Also, remember that this eclipse energy is something that activates. It activates situations for months, so changes can happen later as well. And there is a progression direction in his chart highlighting that tells us of the potential for this change during the summer. Progressed and directed meridian opposition to his natal Saturn, which brings in the Jupiter here too, which comes in August. So definite review of the direction in the career with potential change. And the Jupiter that comes in here can mean perhaps that he's relieved to be separated from having to carry this burden. And we've got transiting Pluto on this axis as well. That can be reinforcing the change. Pluto and Saturn are both change planets. When they come together, that is deep change. It's change of structure, but there's a much deeper change in the way that you're actually operating. And the progressed Mercury here is here too. That tells us about his outlook and potential vocational changes. The Pluto opposition to the Jupiter, that's also on this axis. There can be potential legal difficulties. Maybe that's when they try to pull the 25th Amendment. And, this is a really important structure. It's telling us about a possible event. I cannot stress enough, though, I have to remain in an athletic stance around the timing and dates due to the sensitive nature of the meridian. Remember, the meridian is the moment that you are born. So if you were born a minute before, a minute after, that can be as much as 3 months on either side of that point in terms of timing. So if his birthday if it's 2 minutes, it would be 6 months. So if his birth time was 8:28 and not 8:30, we could be talking about a 6-month difference. But I don't think that it's that much. I think it's fairly accurate. So I think that you should be looking at an orb of June, July, August, possibly September, October but again, a bit of an athletic stance here. Most important is that this progression direction is happening. So if we have a change incoming, it'll be a great test for the accuracy of the birth time in his chart. Now, also at the same time in this July-August time frame in his chart, in his progressed chart, and we're going to isolate that, we have this Aries, Neptune, Zeus, which can be a lot of confusion, denials, rejections, public blunders related to his work. And then we also have this Zeus, Chronos, Neptune, Zeus, Sun, Neptune, which can be telling us that he's failing. It could tell us about a fraudulent leader. Now, I'm well aware of the spectrum of how planetary energies can manifest. And yes, these structures can be creative, they can be inspirational. And on occasion, I'll get an email from someone saying like, why didn't you consider the way that Neptune can operate in a more highly creative way or spiritually? Well, I'm well aware of that. But when I'm trying to impart information to people without losing the narrative, I make calls based on the whole chart that I'm looking at in terms of which way I think it's going to go. And that way I can stay on point and make a call based on all of this. All right, so could we see Biden removed from office and Harris in? This is a real possibility when looking at Harris's chart. Either a real actual change where they call the 25th on Biden, and he's at, because you can see those separating aspects in his chart, or it's hard to imagine him staying in, or he stays in, but there's still a major change in the partnership. So this is a really strong potential when you look at Harris's chart, because her chart shows these undeniable changes in partnerships and the potential for ascent in the career area. So starting now, and actually we are going to be working a lot with her sun moon midpoint, because that is the point that is making all of these directions and progressions. Sun moon midpoint, and you could see her, this is a full moon situation. So she's got the what is it? Yes, moon Aries, sun Libra opposition, and it's really tight. Sun moon in astrology, in Uranian astrology, the sun moon midpoint is one of the most important midpoint structures for relationships. It is the flow between the conscious and the unconscious. It is relationships and partnerships. It tells us about the temperament of the mind. It tells us about daily rhythms. And so this point configures into directions, progressions, into the transits, really important for her over the coming couple years. And absolutely this summer. So starting now and over the next month, that takes us through April, she's got directed sun, moon, Uranus around her natal meridian, which is telling us that there's probably a lot of tension in our partnerships, a lot of sudden change or change, a need for independence. It can be that too, but you're already seeing this change with her. Biden's put her in charge of the immigration issue. She's behind him in shadow at every single moment. That's the way it's been all along, but now he's really putting her up there. At the same time as that, we have Pluto begins a few-year transit of this sun moon midpoint, her natal sun moon midpoint. And so this is deep transformation, and it definitely leads to transformation in partnerships, relationships, because they are the outer manifestation of the conscious and unconscious parts of ourselves. So, and also her sun moon midpoint at 27 Capricorn 43 sits right at the nation's Pluto return point at 27 Capricorn 32. That's receiving this same Pluto return. And if we go to the other side, even visually, this is incredible to see. Where Admetos is, so this Admetos is an aspect to her meridian, her soul. So it forms this, so you have that Pluto Admetos that I've been talking about, structure on the world axis hooked into 3 of her personal points. So this is, this is so incredibly karmic. And whenever Pluto is transiting, coming close to the exact point of the nation's Pluto return, it hits her sun moon midpoint. There are a lot of interesting things about Kamala's chart that could indicate, this interesting ascent and what she's mirroring for the collective, which I'll get into. I should probably do her chart separately. So let's see where we were. And we've got, in April, brings transiting Saturn to her progressed ascendant. Actually, it's an opposition. It's on her descendant. So indicating that there could be structural changes in her partnerships as well. And Saturn moves above the horizon here, so that means she will start to have more impact on the public. June brings a Jupiter transit to her meridian. Her meridian's her soul, which is so expansive and so successful in the career area. And at the same time in June through mid-July, so now we're into the summer, her directed ascendant and node to her sun, moon, Pluto structure here, indicating again changes and transitions in partnerships and relationships. You know, that June, July, August window looks very interesting in her chart. Also, as we move through July and August, we come to the Sun, Moon, Pluto direction to her natal Kronos, which could mean changes in her official position, her government position. Likewise, in the July-August window, we have Kronos, Vulcanus, Neptune on her Aries point or world axis. And I cannot stress the importance of this axis natally in her chart, because not only is it her relationship to the world, we all have an Aries point, but for her, it picks up these very sensitive personal point structures. Sun meridian, moon meridian tells us of her personal recognition in the world, her public recognition, her personal attitude to the world. And with the approaching Kronos, Vulcanus, Neptune, it can certainly be a diplomatic, spiritual, humanitarian leadership, but it can also be incredible deception or deceptive leadership. That something can appear one way when it's not, and that can be someone who's malevolent or benevolent. Trump has a similar structure in his chart, Zeus, Kronos, Neptune, where he can appear one way to people when in fact he's not. And this is a major structure natally in Kamala's chart. So these patterns are intrinsic to her. They are part of her consciousness, and when you begin to go down that rabbit hole in her chart, this is someone who is very imaginative, very idealistic, with a very strong independence and will to go out and make things happen. This is someone who's very into speculation, and she's probably won and lost big in her life, especially around money. And her chart indicates, you know, this use, a lot of use of this shadow feminine, this power of attraction, the seduction, feigning to get what she wants, which is probably why she has the call girl reputation. But we'll see. If she assumes Biden's position, and I think in the short term through the summer, there are 100% chance of changes in the partnership area for her. The question is, are the changes for Joe going to be the 25th Amendment, where they're going to take him out and she assumes the presidency? Because I really wouldn't be surprised if that dark feminine energy needs a giant mirror for the Hive. Now, the big clue that these power issues are up for her are these major transits of Neptune and Pluto to personal points. Pluto transiting over the next few years, her sun moon here. So this is a real power check, how she's been using and identifying with her power consciously, subconsciously, you know, and her relationships that will mirror that integration. Transiting Neptune, which will quite literally be chasing for the next several years this whole cachet of personal points, natal ascendant and node, directed sun and moon, progressed sun and node. So a lot of uncertainty, confusion with what she's doing, with her connections. She may need to come to grips with a lot of deception in her relationships or in her environment. And I also want to note that she's had the Neptune transiting her natal Venus in opposition over the last few years, which can bring in relationships and situations where we over-idealize or we're not seeing others clearly because it's serving another agenda. And that was definitely the scenario, because it's such a centerpiece when you get into her chart around her meridian, around this Venus, Neptune, Vulcanus, around not seeing things clearly. And remember, she's a speculator. She's got strong impulses and instincts and a caution to the wind temperament, but also a strong dependence on others. So she's an idealist with a lot of drive. And so is she entering these relationships and using her power in the service of humanity, or in her own self interest to power? And this is the bifurcation that we are seeing everywhere. It is the split between service to self, service to others consciousness. Many people feel she's genuine. Many feel she's disingenuous. My feel from the chart and my feel in general from her is of the dark feminine, that she uses seduction, which is the negative manifestation of the feminine, to assist in her goals, service to self, not in the service of humanity. And that is why she's on the world stage right now. So Pluto shows all forms of power, masculine and feminine, that are falling away. All right, now moving on to Trump's chart. And he's had these Jupiter progressions, directions, transits this month, and they're going to continue into April. Transiting Jupiter can be very expansive. It's very good for positive growth and development. It can also expand the garbage, but I think these are all very positive in his chart. And as we move forward into April, he'll have progressed Jupiter-Pluto on his progressed meridian, as well as transiting Jupiter over his meridian and ascendant. So the Jupiter actually opposing the ascendant and conjuncting his descendant as we move into April. So all of this, which is very positive for growth and development, but particularly in relationships and partnerships with that conjunction to the descendant. And as I mentioned earlier, from a distance back in January, I thought this expansion may be in relation to his presidency. But when I moved into the structures in the chart and started looking more deeply, it was connected to his alliances, his strategy, expansion of the military process. Could also have to do with promoting hope and optimism, rallying the people. And I thought, well, this might be the time that he might announce a new social platform. Like that could be the expansion, which he did, because maintaining the freedom of speech and connection with the people is absolutely key. He did have another Jupiter configuration around the CPAC speech the end of February, and that speech definitely rallied the people. And I saw a week or two after that, General Flynn speak, and he started talking about the transition that we are in as a country, which is the nation's Pluto return, the evolution, the transformation, right? He was talking about how George Washington lost all of the battles, but in the end, he won the war. And during that time, he rallied the people and kept their spirit alive, that there are battles won and battles lost, but the trajectory is always forward. And, Pluto is exhuming it all. Not only is it shedding light on the face of darkness, but we are experiencing the darkness firsthand. We're experiencing the evil, the coercion, the corruption, in a way that is irrevocable. And so we must band together and ride those waves and cross the Delaware, so to speak, to safety. And so there are many planetary pictures that are setting forth over the next several months that would infer alliances that are happening, alliances with the military or special forces, special planning, strategy, special ops that are involved. Although he would say he's a civilian now, I believe he really is the shadow president. We have the directed Zeus Chronos Apollon on the Aries point that has been in effect the last month, which goes into a Zeus Apollon on the Aries point into mid-April. And this is all about this expansion of strategy, of the activity. Zeus Chronos Apollon can be expansion of preparations and armament, or just broadening of the leadership in general. Here over at the progress Sun, we have progress Zeus Chronos node. They're moving together from the end of March through the end of May, just in time for those eclipses. And this Zeus Chronos node, which again in this structure for military alliances or associations for carrying out special tasks. Now, as I had been thinking, he did announce that he was starting this a new social media platform, and that it would be out in about 2 or 3 months. And this makes a lot of sense with his chart as well, because while the next few months you could see this sort of strategy and planning, once we get to June, July, August, he's going to start making a lot more of a political and public impact. That there's going to be a much stronger mutual interest between the public and him. In July, his directed meridian makes a direction with his moon Vulcanus midpoint, very powerful, very public. And transiting Jupiter will be opposing his ascendant. I mean, this is all a great setup for this whole social media thing, which I believe is really going to take off. Also at the same time, he's got meridian, his directed meridian Aries point, which is very much a midpoint structure of him, how he's operating out in the world. It's directing with his natal Mercury. So, his opinion, speech, communications, they're out in the world. His directed Mercury also to his natal node, sharing of ideas, business, and social connections. So, and he needs the ability to communicate freely with the people. And it is, as General Flynn talked about, keeping the spirit of the people alive, because this is the long game, and this is the Pluto return for the next few years. And what Trump is doing right now is essentially hanging the dark out to dry, and he must be out of the picture and be neutral so that the people can see. And as Pluto begins to exhume the darkness, as we're watching the undoing of everything he put in place and reversing us back to the old paradigm, the old system, and he's playing out this whole strategy from behind the scenes, because remember, the people need to wake up organically. They need to come to insight within themselves and by themselves, because that's how Plutonian transformation works. And so everyone needs to prepare themselves for the long haul, because this is the process of change, and change never comes easy. And so this is really Trump moving into a new phase. Remember, this past December, January 2021, he had his progress meridian conjuncting his progress Saturn. And so this is a structural change on a soul level, a career change. It's the beginning of a new cycle, a call to adventure with that Saturnian energy. And we also have coming up in May the lunar eclipse, May 26, which is squaring his progress Sun. Then we move to the solar eclipse on June 10th, which conjuncts his natal Sun and opposes his moon and his node. A lot of sensitive points there. So these eclipses really pull him forward into the career area, but also are bringing awareness to emotional patterns that may have blocked his development. And you've got transiting Neptune squaring these sensitive points, the Sun, the Moon, the Node, this entire year, which is a huge transit for him. Actually, for all three of them, Biden, Harris, Trump, they all have these strong Neptunian transits. So, Neptune is refining, it's sensitizing, it's squatting on this whole area, just sitting there back and forth this year. And Neptune, it attunes us to the collective unconscious. It attunes us to the universal flow. It connects us to source. And it also dissolves those structures and emotional attachments that no longer serve, that straitjacket our soul. And I'm sure that there will be times of great uncertainty and confusion for him this year. It's a good thing that he's comfortable and at home, because he really also, all three of them, need to really watch their vitality, their health with these aspects, because, they can be so, because you're so attuned, they can be so draining. The Neptunian energy could also be talking about his operating more covertly, more hidden, behind the scenes, and kind of secret associations, that there can continue to be a lot of obscurity around his leadership with all of this Neptune. But it can be very humanitarian as well. It could be obscure and hard to see, but something benevolent that's operating behind the scenes. Because Trump is entering, Trump is entering this new phase of work, and all of these planetary energies, the May-June eclipses, the Neptune transits, the Pluto transit to his Venus, Hades, Saturn, which has been, this process of losing and letting everything go, to see who is fully with him, and particularly who sees the value that he's setting forth. So all of these things, particularly the Neptune transit this year, are about a refining and honing and expansion of his skills, his visionary, intuitive, and creative skills, because the task ahead will be in the harnessing and shepherding of the collective unconscious. Showing them the cobwebs we must clear out to make room for evolution, and keeping the spirit alive. Because, again, all the real power lies in the people, not in the few technocrats or globalists in the world. And Trump knows this better than anyone. He knows if the people are conscious, that is the only thing that is needed for revolution and evolution. So if everyone's looking for something to happen soon with Trump and the presidency, I'm really not seeing it in the short term or over the next 6 months in his chart. But the eclipses at the end of the year are incredible. The lunar eclipse in November at 27 degrees Taurus, conjuncting his meridian, squaring his ascendant, which is basically, it's exactly on his meridian ascendant midpoint, so it's hitting all four angles. This is going to be very powerful for work with the public. And the solar eclipse at 1222 Gemini, exactly on his meridian Aries point and directed Aries point, which is the relationship to the world. You can just really see his chart and influence expanding. And once we get into spring 2022, and particularly into the summer, July 2022, when his progressed moon in declination crosses the celestial equator, which only happens once every 14 years, anytime the progressed moon in declination crosses the celestial equator is a life turning point. There are important life changes, and there are other progressions, directions, and transits at that time that are indicating success. So we'll keep an eye on that. So long and very loose view, because I haven't gone deep into the details, which I will over time. The fall for Trump, particularly mid-September through October, could be when he begins to make a move on the deep state. Now, before this period in August, Uranus will be on the world axis, indicating a lot of tension in the world, events that manifest suddenly, disruptiveness, or public anticipation and excitement. It can be explosions, eruptions, or things connected with technology. So that's important to note. I think August will be interesting from that perspective. But as we get into later in September, in Trump's chart, we have directing Uranus conjuncting his natal ascendant, a lot of changes in his environment, tension, excitement, and simultaneous his very important Zeus, Kronos, Neptune in his chart, and it's activated in 2 ways, which makes it even more important. Again, the Zeus, Kronos, Neptune can be someone who is a fraudulent leader, it can be failed leadership, and it can also be a humanitarian leader of invisible energies, someone who leads with their intuition or inspiration. So both with Uranus simultaneous to his Zeus, Kronos, Neptune with the Saturn could represent intervention by the government and revolutionary activities. And the Sun meridian is here too, emphasizing the leadership. And he's also got, just right before that, in early September, he's got a progressed Pluto-Hades on his progressed meridian. So that can be a worsening situation. But athletics dance here because, we'll get a more refined picture as I have time to study the entire lay of the land. So it's important right now to stay aware. And everyone needs to prepare, again, for real soul stamina at this time. That's what's required through this Pluto return and the Pluto admetos to the world axis. There will be the first culmination of these energies, meaning Pluto reaches actually it happens in the February, March, and the spring of 2022, where Pluto reaches its return point to the nation's natal Pluto for the first time. And at the same time, we have a very close conjunction of that Pluto admetos, that very deep change from the ground up on the world axis, with Poseidon there as well. And I think this will be a pivotal point. It's telling us there are deep changes in the Hive's worldview, deep changes mentally and spiritually. It's change in the world due to awakening. So we will start to see a change in the fabric of our reality, and it can also be stagnation, definitely. It'll probably be a bit of both, I think, more so because the Poseidon tends to be a really positive situation. On the whole, it can be false ideals, but we're going to be at a crossroads at that time for sure. Please, everyone, subscribe to my BitChute channel. I will put the link in the description section below. Peace and blessings to all, and I especially wish for everyone soul stamina at this time.